2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
What you've got to do is, it's a collective. You've got to look like a meteorologist. Nobody out there is necessarily going to be a meteorologist, but what I do on a daily basis is I look globally. I look at what we've got in terms of the track of weather that we've had in the UK. So if you go back a couple of years and we go back to the heat wave of July, August 2022, 40.3 degrees, there's a dot in the landscape, and before then there was other incidents going on. Now that was a huge dot because that was extreme temperatures, and then we, since then, last summer, although we didn't get that kind of record, we saw months with records, various months, May and June and September and October, all-time records. So another dot, and then you're looking again globally. What's going on globally? What's going on in China, in USA, in Africa, now in Australia, for example, records falling like ninepins. So when these storms come along, you've got to say, okay, would they have happened anyway? The answer is probably yes. They probably would have done. But when you start getting where we're up to with Jocelyn is number 10, then that's not the record. The record is 11 named storms, 2015-16. So we've been there before, but only a few years ago. So these things are starting to mount up. And do you know what? On the can of climate change, climatologists, better people than me, people who study this expertly, and they look at it and they say, OK, what we're going to get with extra dimension of heat in the atmosphere, which energy and heat that basically means that you've got more intense storms potentially that can carry more water. What do you get? You get higher wind velocities and you get more water and or snow. We've just gone through a period where parts of this country have been deluged and flooded for the first time.
Yes. I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It is 1 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of February.
Royal reunion. As Prince William returns to royal duties today, carrying out an investiture at Windsor Castle, could he reach out to his brother Harry, who of course is back in the UK? With GB News sources stressing how important family is to the Prince of Wales, we ask, does that extend to his brother?
Tooth Hurty will join the queue, which reveals a crisis in UK dentistry. Hundreds in Bristol waiting hours just to register for an NHS dentist. The government says it's now offering cash incentives, huge cash incentives, for dentists to take more NHS patients. Are you living in a dental desert?
Stop protest. Should ministers be able to ban political protests themselves? Well, the former Home Secretary thinks so. She says it will help fight mass extremism. But would a new law deprive Brits of their civil liberties?
Well, during PMQs, there was a little bit of an altercation, and Rishi Sunak is being asked by many, including, of course, the opposition, to apologise to Brianna Ghey's mother over his comments regarding whether trans women are women.
Yes, this was, of course, the exchange between Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer. Midway through their weekly exchange, Brianna Ghey, the murdered transgender teenager's mother, was sitting up in the public gallery of the House of Commons. And in an unrelated matter, Rishi Sunak listed a number of U-turns that Keir Starmer has made, one of which he said he can't define what a woman is, or maybe that was only a 99% U-turn, referring to a time when Keir Starmer said that 99% of women can't have penises. And it was seen by many, I think, to be not an appropriate thing to say, particularly in front of the mother of the murdered transgender teenager.
Clumsy, perhaps, certainly, perhaps distasteful and maybe hurtful, but also I'm not sure why Keir Starmer had to make a big thing of it and bring in Brianna Ghey's mother to PMQs, to the discourse itself in that way. Is that not distasteful too?
I thought it made me respect Keir Starmer more. I thought that, given Keir Starmer often sits on a fence, often doesn't say what he thinks, I thought he would just move on and leave it there. But actually what he did is what I think any decent person would do in that situation. Knowing how that might have felt to Brianna Ghey's mother, hearing that, he wanted to speak, I think, in front of her to say what she would have wanted to hear, which was to...
So you think completely sincere from Keir Starmer and nothing to do with trying to grab headlines?
I don't think he'll have got votes from that. I think he said that on a point of principle, which from Keir Starmer is rare and commendable.
Maybe, perhaps I'm more cynical. Let us know what you think. GBViews at GBnews.com. Was Rishi Sunak wrong to say what he did? GBViews at GBnews.com. But first, your headlines.
Tom, Emily, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. The headlines at 1 o'clock. A simple choice needs to be made on the future of the NHS. That's according to Sir Keir Starmer as he faced the Prime Minister in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had led the health service to fall into neglect.
He should follow Labour, scrap the non-dom tax status, use the money to fund 2 million more hospital appointments every year. But, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is oddly reluctant to follow us on this. What exactly is so special about this tax avoidance scheme that the Prime Minister prioritises it above the NHS?
However, the Prime Minister says the best way to ensure the NHS has the funding it needs is not to make billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Today's PMQs come after the government revealed a plan for dentists to be offered cash incentives to take on new patients. The new scheme aims to make appointments available to around 1 million more people across England. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 for each new patient. It comes as hundreds of people endure long waits in Bristol, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will have his weekly audience with the King over the phone, following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since a series of health blows to the royals. He carried out an investiture, a ceremony where he formally hands out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William is expected to carry out further royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. And it comes after Prince Harry was reunited with his father, arriving in London less than 24 hours after the King's cancer diagnosis was made public. The Duke of Sussex is said to have spent 45 minutes with His Majesty at Clarence House before the King and the Queen were seen heading to Sandringham on the royal helicopter. It's unclear how long Prince Harry plans to stay in Britain. However, royal sources suggest he has no plans to meet with his brother. And the Old Bailey has been evacuated after a fire alert and reports of an explosion there. A loud bang and billowing black smoke triggered the response of 4 fire engines and 25 firefighters who dealt with an incident involving an electrical substation near the Old Bailey. Judges were seen coordinating with court staff and firefighters, while barristers and court users were temporarily banned from re-entering. Traffic disruptions are expected in the area as the safety checks are underway. The former pop star Gary Glitter has been denied parole. He was jailed for 16 years in 2015 for sexually abusing 3 schoolgirls between 1975 and 1980. It comes after a parole hearing took place behind closed doors last month to consider the 79-year-old's case. In other news, Russia has launched a massive barrage of strikes on Kyiv and other Ukrainian cities during the morning's rush hour. For those watching on TV, these are the latest pictures coming to us after the aftermath of the attacks. You can see a large residential building on fire and people evacuating. 2 people are reported to have been killed so far. Russian forces fired 64 missiles and drones towards the capital, more than half of which were intercepted by Ukraine's air defences. However, officials say falling debris has cut off electricity to parts of Kyiv, leaving thousands without power. And the right-wing media personality Tucker Carlson is in Moscow and says he plans to record an interview with Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News host announced the interview late yesterday in a short video posted to his website and on social media. He said he plans to expose what he called lies told by other media about Russia, though he provided no evidence and falsely claimed that other journalists hadn't bothered to try to interview Mr. Putin. It comes as Russia's detention of American journalist Evan Gershkovich reaches 315 days. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on screen or go to gbnews/alerts. Now, back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. 8 minutes past 1, and Prince William returned to work today following his father's cancer diagnosis. The King has postponed all public duties while he receives treatment.
Yes, Prince Harry arrived in Britain yesterday to see his father, where they had a short meeting before the King and Queen travelled to Sandringham in the royal helicopter, where he will stay until he recovers.
Well, of course, we're looking at Prince William there. But our GB News presenter, Pip Thompson, is in Windsor with the very latest. And Pip, what's Prince William been up to today?
Prince William, well, he has been back on public duty today for the first time since his father's cancer diagnosis on Monday, and indeed for the first time in 3 weeks, because he has been at home helping to look after his 3 children while his wife Catherine recovers from that abdominal surgery. So it was an investiture ceremony handing out around 50 honours. The ceremony lasted around an hour or so, and among the recipients was former England footballer Ellen White. She received her MBE, and of course everybody wanted to send good wishes to the King as he convalesces at Sandringham, and we did get to ask Ellen White about the little bit of conversation she did have with Prince William earlier.
I sent my best wishes to the King and obviously to Kate as well, to Princess of Wales, but yeah, no, he was lovely, yeah, it was incredible to meet him again, and to obviously for him to give me the MBE. So yeah, it was a very special day.
Other people we spoke to who also received honours said Prince William very much appreciated their good wishes. It is a busy day for him because from Windsor he now goes into central London for a gala dinner tonight for the London Air Ambulance, and it is there where he is expected to make a speech. So of course we're all going to be listening to it, aren't we? What will he say? Will he refer to his father's diagnosis, the health of his wife, the good wishes that are being sent from all around the world? What we do know is that he will not be mentioning his younger brother, Prince Harry. Prince Harry, we know, flew in from California yesterday, flew over 5,000 miles to spend what seems like less than an hour with his father before King Charles went off to Sandringham. And we do not know if Prince Harry is still on UK soil, actually. It's understood he did spend the night in a London hotel, but it is not expected that there will be any conversation or contact between the 2 brothers while he is here. And it's been interesting today, actually, because I've just been chatting. I did record it, so we'll play it for you a little bit later. I've just been chatting, I don't know whether you can see them, 2 ladies over there, Anne and Grace. They've been sitting on the bench. They've brought that cardboard cutout of King Charles, a get well soon balloon. They're here. Anne has come all the way from Cardiff in Wales, but they are here to send on their good wishes to King Charles and really to get an update on how he is. And what we have heard in the last few minutes, Tom and Emily, is that his weekly conversation with the Prime Minister, that will not be happening face to face this week. That is going to be done over the phone. So a little bit of a break from royal protocol there.
Thank you very much indeed, Pip Thompson. Lovely to see those two over there with their get well soon balloon.
Looking forward to hearing what they have to say.
Draped in the Union Jack. Look forward to what they had to say. Yes, indeed. Shall we speak to the royal commentator, Jenny Bond? Jenny, thank you very much for joining us. Of course, many will have hoped that with Prince Harry being back in town and the King poorly, there perhaps would be a chance for reconciliation.
Oh, yes, you would, wouldn't you? But I'm afraid it's not that simple. You can't wave a magic wand and put this family back together again. That's become very apparent. I mean, it does seem extraordinary that no sooner had Harry arrived at Clarence House than less than an hour later, the King and Queen left. But I gather, I mean, the circumstances around that is that Charles was feeling quite tired, quite understandably, after his first round of whatever treatment he's having. Even so, you thought that meeting might have gone on a little longer. I hope it was friendly. We do not know. It would have been quite an awkward meeting, really, as regards Camilla, because you'll remember that Harry really was quite cruel about Camilla in his book Spare. So that meeting took place, and brief as it was, I thought, well, at least we can talk about reconciliation between father and son, and I think we can. But then we got the news that there is no plan whatsoever for William to meet Harry. We're told that there are indications that Harry would be willing to meet his brother if that was on offer. But I think William has shown today, really, that he has disowned Harry, doesn't want to know him, probably doesn't even like him anymore. And Harry is just not part of his life. I think that rift is so deep now. And that has been shown by Harry being here and them not meeting. It's so deep that I really do wonder if it can ever, ever be mended.
Oh, it is sad. But I wonder, Jenny Bond, what does it say that Prince Harry stayed in a hotel last night rather than in a royal residence, rather than perhaps at Windsor or somewhere else? He had a 45-minute meeting with the King. Has that bond been really mended to any extent?
I know, it's extraordinary, isn't it? I reported on this family for 35 years and they still surprise me. They do not act in the way that other families might be expected to. Yes, I know they've got lots of difficulties, but nevertheless, if the King and Queen, Charles and Camilla, were going to head off to Sandringham for rest and recuperation, I thought, well, one of two things. Harry could bunk down in Clarence House, where he used to live, and he'd have the house to himself, or he would follow perhaps by car, if he wasn't going to go in the helicopter, with his father and his stepmother. But neither of those things happened. Instead, he went off to a hotel, and goodness knows what he did with himself. And goodness knows whether there's going to be another meeting or he's going to jet straight back to California. It's a very strange and odd situation altogether.
Yes, I wonder if he does feel a bit sheepish and unwelcome and perhaps a little bit awkward after all that's gone on and not really sure what to do himself.
After writing about Camilla as an evil stepmother, perhaps it would have been a bit awkward to follow them back. But Jenny Bond, thank you so much for talking through those issues with us. We really, really do appreciate your time and your expertise.
Yes, indeed. But in other news, the government is planning to give dentists £20,000 in bonuses if they take on extra NHS patients.
Well, earlier in Prime Minister's questions...
And if they move to an area where there is a dentist desert.
A dental desert.
A dental desert.
I like that phrase, although I'm sure if I lived in one, I really would not like it.
No.
But earlier in Prime Minister's questions, the dentistry recovery plan led to a heated exchange between the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, and the Prime Minister. Let's have a listen.
I welcome the fact that he's finally admitted that he's failed on waiting lists in the NHS. I also welcome that he's finally acknowledged the crisis in NHS dentistry. He's calling it a recovery plan after 14 years of Tory government. What exactly does he think the NHS dentistry is recovering from?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as ever, he conveniently forgets the impact of a pandemic on NHS dentistry, and it was specifically because of the close proximity nature of dental provision that it was unable to operate as normal throughout the pandemic. That was the recommendation of the medical and clinical experts, Mr. Speaker, which is why inevitably there is a backlog in dental care and the impact that it has. But that's why, as my honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will outline later today for the House, we're putting more funding in to provide more NHS provision across the country, on top of plans that will see the number of dental training places increase by 40%, Mr. Speaker. But I would actually just point out, our plans mean that there will be 2.5 million more NHS appointments, which is in fact 3 times more than the Labour Party are proposing.
Well, as you heard, Rishi Sunak hopes that it'll see more than 1 million extra people get their teeth checked and bring an end to scenes like this in Bristol, where hundreds of people queued outside a new dental practice in the hope of getting registered.
Yes, it was quite extraordinary to see that long weaving queue. Our reporter Theo Gicomba joins us now from Bristol. Theo, huge number of people were queuing outside this one dental practice. It just shows how there is a supply and demand problem here, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. Well, it showed the scale, what we've seen right across the country, particularly after COVID, when people are trying to register to dentist practices. Some of them, of course, had shut and others have now opened, like this one, for example, in Bristol, which opened on Monday. They have another practice, but this one closed 6 months ago and they've reopened it again. And as we've seen in the last couple of days, there have been queues. Hundreds of people were coming here to register as new patients, NHS patients specifically. Now, I've just spoken to the dental team here and they've said they've now closed the doors to people coming in to register in the last hour or so. So no longer people can just turn up and queue and get registered. Since I've been here already, I've been seeing people turned away. They've had to lock the door and asking people, do you have an appointment? And they say, no, well, we can't take new patients. So that's something we'll be hearing from the dental team within the next hour or so as they're going through a lot of those patients. And as we've heard in the last 24 hours, there's this £20,000 incentive for dental practices to open in underserved areas. Now, will we see more practices like this open up? We might end up seeing more queues like we've seen here in Bristol in the coming weeks and months as more practices open. But of course, some people have had to take out their own teeth with pliers. We've heard of those cases. Some of them haven't been able to see the dentist for some years now, and of course, looking out for their children as well. So their hands are certainly full here. They've said 1,500 people registered within the last 2 days.
Well, what a dramatic sight that the door has been locked now to stop people from queuing up again. No room at the inn, no room at the dental practice, because that was an extraordinary queue.
Bristol is a very highly populated area. Lots of people have moved to Bristol. It's got a huge population. It's clear that the NHS dentists just can't keep up with demand. I do wonder if this £20,000, although this won't be in St Paul's in Bristol because that's very much city, but moving dentists for £20,000 to go to a rural area, presumably in the middle of nowhere.
Will it fix?
I'd take it up if I were a dentist.
Well, I don't know what the starting salary for a dentist is, actually.
Well, they do quite well, but then a lot of them do go private, and that's part of the problem.
Yes, although I suppose if you go private, you can really rack up the cash.
You can.
Perhaps maybe you'll have a bigger incentive to just do more private work. Maybe the $20,000 offered by the NHS will never ever match that.
And lots of part-time, of course, which makes things more difficult. But yes, it's a good gig being a dentist. Yes. It's a shame that we only have about 1,000 places to study for dentistry in this country per year. Perhaps that's an issue. Also, being a dentist, you can do a bit of Botox, bit of filler on the side, make a bit of
do you know what,
bit
Emily?
of extra cash that way.
Almost every single junior doctor I know, personally, has got a side hustle, has got a separate little business they run on Instagram or whatever, offering Botox, offering fillers. So when you say that junior doctors earn this much, no, they always do all this extra stuff on the side. They earn a lot more.
I'm sure the BMA would dispute that vehemently.
Well, it's anecdotal anecdotal evidence. But also thank you to Theo Chicomba for bringing us the news that now St Paul's Dental Practice in Bristol has locked their doors to new customers following that enormous queue.
Blimey. But coming up, former Home Secretary Suella Braverman wants ministers to be able to ban protests as a way of tackling extremism. Does she have a point? Should the Home Secretary be able to ban a protest? You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
Francis, Just Stop Oil have in the past broken the law. I remember distinctly the Dartford crossing. That ended up with 2 jailed, I believe, if I remember correctly. Is it ever justified in your view?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I mean, I would have to say yes. I mean, we're trying to preserve my life, your lives, the lives of your family, and it's not just the planet that we're trying to protect, it's the lives of millions of people. And, you know, we know from history that we have to break the law in order to put pressure on the government and to be listened to.
No one would doubt your sincerity in your views. You genuinely believe in what you fight for. But there are others who think differently. For example, there are Islamist extremists who believe that people will go to hell unless they convert to Islam. They will sincerely, perhaps, break the law in order to force people to convert. In their view, they might be saving people's lives for eternity. There might be abortion activists who say that babies are being murdered and to save their lives we need to break the law to stop people having abortions. Why do you get to say that your moral conviction is the one that's right and other people's individual moral conviction are those that are wrong?
So what's really integral to the Just Stop Oil campaign is the fact that it is a non-violent campaign. That's what separates us from the examples that you've just given. We're absolutely dedicated non-violence, both as a tactic and as a principle. So though we might be breaking the law...
If individuals take it upon themselves to break the law for whatever their course is, surely the way that we decide what society wants in general is democratic and within the law.
Well, of course, we know also that protest is absolutely integral to maintaining and upholding a democracy, and in particular, non-violent protest. I mean, I really can't express to you how severe this situation is, and I'm sure you know this.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 1:24. Welcome back to Good Afternoon Britain. Now, next Monday, the Prime Minister will take part in a special People's Forum live on GB News in the northeast of England. So over the course of the hour, he'll take questions directly from you, the great British public.
And if you want to be one of the people asking those questions, putting the Prime Minister on the spot, head to gbnews.com/PM. That's gbnews.com/PM.
Yes, that's to register your interest today, or you can scan the QR code that is there on the screen now. We'll just leave it up there for a little longer if you just need to grab your phone. That's how you can do it, or just type in gbnews.com/PM. Oh, there you go.
Now, Suella Braverman has called on ministers to be given the power to ban protests without requiring agreement from other bodies such as the police.
Well, the former Home Secretary has previously criticised police very strongly for, in her view, failing to take sufficient action over pro-Palestinian marches, which she described as hate marches.
So, we're asking today, should government ministers have the unchecked power to ban protests, or is this a bridge too far? Joining us now is political commentator Emma Webb, who thinks protests should be able to be banned, and Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor, who thinks that they shouldn't. Well, let's dive straight in. Ajmal, why shouldn't the Home Secretary in specific situations be able to say, no, this march can't go ahead?
Article 10 of our country's Human Rights Act gives us guarantee of having our views and having the right to express them. What if I actually want to demonstrate against the Home Secretary? Is the Home Secretary going to ban me? I think that is a step too far. And then to suggest that the pro-Palestinian marches are hate marches, is she trying to malign millions of people, not just in the country, but across the world, who are standing in solidarity with the Palestinians? They've lost more than 30,000 people in the recent massacre that we've seen take place. We have to be very careful. We need to protect our rights to freedom, freedom of expression, freedom of assembly. Of course, as long as it's done within the framework of our law. We don't want to break the law. Nobody wants to break the law. Politicians who are elected by us, remember what Abraham Lincoln said. These
Ajmal, what about her other suggestions, recommendations? She also wants the Home Secretary to be able to outlaw any expression of support of terrorism. She wants to make it easier to prosecute anti-Semitic chants, and she also wants to prescribe groups of extremist concern. Would you be happy with those three?
Sounds like the King of Saudi Arabia talking right now, if this is what Suella Braverman is asking for, or the dictator of North Korea, or even the dictator of Egypt. This is what happens in those countries that are not democratic, that are ruled by illegitimate regimes. We have a parliament. In our parliament, we have an amazing record of our country, our government, and our elected politicians doing the right thing and listening to the public. Public do not support this. This is a step in the wrong direction. We should be discussing and debating issues, even if they're difficult, contentious issues. If they're not debated, where should they go? So I think Suella Braverman has got it wrong, and we should be allowed to express ourselves within our law, and we should be free to express as well as demonstrate as and when we need to.
Emma Webb, is Suella Braverman acting like Kim Jong-un here?
I don't think I would go that far, but I have to be very, very clear, Tom, and I hate to disappoint, but I'm actually not in favour of what Suella Braverman is suggesting. I'm not in favour of banning protests, and I say that very, very unequivocally. I think we have to consider, she's obviously making a number of points here. The key one that we're discussing right now is this power that she wants ministers to have to be able to ban particular protests, rather than that power being one that rests with the police. I think we need to think about how that could very easily backfire. We're facing a potential Labour government. We know that there are people in all parts of society, particularly on the left, who regard, say, gender-critical feminists as being extremists. So it's very clear how this could backfire. Now, I disagree with your fellow guest there in his description of what these marches are. I actually do agree with Suella Braverman. I think her diagnosis is correct. I think we have a really serious problem on our hands that does need to be resolved. But I don't necessarily think that these powers are the way to do it. And actually, I think we have to consider the fact that the police already do have powers that they don't use. Part of this is a problem with policing. And we've got a man currently on the run in this country who has half of his face seriously disfigured, is walking around without trying to hide himself, is been caught on CCTV across the country, is a sex offender and an illegal immigrant, and the police aren't capable of even finding him. So I'm skeptical about whether even increased powers would be enforceable. But the reality is that the police do have powers that they are not properly using. Particularly one example is in stopping people from climbing all over our war memorials. So there are powers there that can be used. It's just that the police don't seem willing to use them, and in other cases seem to be willfully naive in how they choose to police these protests.
Well, let's shift the terms of this debate in light of that and say, should the police be using the powers that they have? Emma, you clearly think that there are instances where the police should have been more forthright in policing protesters. Ajmal, what do you make of that?
All the protests that we're talking about, and especially Suella Braverman's comment come at the back of the Palestinian or pro-Palestinian protests. Pro-Palestinian protests have been attended by people of all faith and none, Muslims, Jews, Christians, Hindus, Sikhs, people of all age and group and nationality. I've been to many of them. I've even spoken at them. I have not seen many disturbances, handful of arrests for lots of things that happens even at a most peaceful rally. People do, unfortunately, bad things. That does not mean we have to ban them. Secondly, if we're saying that these marches are, or Suella Braverman is saying these marches are hate marches, why is it hate march? We're talking about Palestinian people's right to exist. We're talking about Palestinian...
Ajmal, to be fair to Suella Braverman, people have seen with their own eyes that there has been extremism, there has been anti-Semitic chants, there has been calls for jihad on the streets. And you're right to point out that, of course, the vast, vast majority are peacefully protesting. But let's not ignore that there has been shades of extremism on these marches.
Shades of extremism even comes from your
blatant extremism.
Blatant and shades of extremism also comes from your own television station when presenters give all sorts of weird opinions. Well, look, in our society, we've got good...
Sorry, you're comparing someone chanting jihad on the streets of London with presenters on GBNews. Is that what you're saying?
I'm not. I'm saying something very simple. I'm saying good, bad and ugly exist in every society. If somebody is breaking the law, arrest them. If somebody is not breaking the law, you can't do anything about them. To banish the entire democratic right of our freedom to speak, express ourselves, because one or two people have broken the law, that makes no sense. Arrest those people, punish them, bring them before the court. We will support it. And of course, from the stage, I myself have said to many people, we are doing our demonstration within the legal framework that we have. The second point is a more important one. You see, it's easy, Emma, to pick out one or two words and just throw them in our direction. For example, calling for jihad. I don't even think you understand the word jihad. It was a jihad for me to attend your program today, cancelling 2 of my previous appointments. I'm starving. That's my jihad with my own life.
Ajmal, and I appreciate you taking the time to come on the channel. Emma, I will have to let you come back on...
You need to understand. Can I just finish my point? Just let me finish my point. You need to understand when we use terminologies that are loaded and we don't explain, we do a disservice to ourselves and everybody else. We're on the same page. We all respect our freedom. We all respect our rights by the law, and we must abide by the law. And not a politician should be dictating.
Emma, can we just get from Emma, we don't understand what jihad means. Shouldn't be worried about that.
This is sophistry and gaslighting. The public can see with their own eyes. And I'm sorry, but the idea that Hizb ut-Tahrir standing in the street holding signs talking about Muslim armies, that people in that context are talking about spiritual jihad is just gaslighting. I'm sorry, but it is. We can have a separate debate about jihad if you want to. I'm absolutely willing to do that. But the reality is, it's not just shades of extremism on these marches. We've had people out in the streets celebrating the biggest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. The idea that anything can excuse what some people have been filmed doing. The fact that there have been people marching down Whitehall with flags that are associated with Islamic State, people who have been shouting Kaiba, Kaiba, Ya Yahud in Whitehall. These things are not excuses.
Emma and Ajmal, we've got to get to the news. Please stay on the line. We'll return to this conversation after our news headlines.
Thanks, Tom. From the GB newsroom at 1:30, these are your headlines. A simple choice needs to be made on the future of the NHS. That's according to Sir Keir Starmer as he faced the Prime Minister in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had led the health service to fall into neglect. However, the Prime Minister says the best way to ensure the NHS has the funding it needs is not to make billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr. Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
And Downing Street says Rishi Sunak will have his weekly audience with the King over the phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since a series of health blows to the royals. He carried out an investiture, a ceremony where he formally hands out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William is expected to carry out further royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. And house prices are continuing to rise across Britain for a fourth straight month. Halifax says house prices saw a 1.3% increase in January. Annual growth also hit a peak of 2.5%, the highest since January last year. Average house prices now stand at just over £291,000. That's up by nearly £4,000 since December. And for the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go back to gbnews.com/alerts.
For a valuable legacy your family can own, gold coins will always shine bright. Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
And here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.2635 and €1.1724. The price of gold is £1,609.25 per ounce. And the FTSE 100's at 7,650 points.
Rosalind Gold proudly sponsors the GB News Financial Report.
Well, let's return to that spicy debate with the political commentator Emma Webb and the Imam and broadcaster Ajmal Masroor. Right, we've made extra time for you two because we felt like this deserved the time. Emma, you've got 1 minute to complete your point, and then we'll end with Ajmal for his final minute. Emma, take it away.
I think Ajmal thinks that we and the British public are stupid. I'm sorry, but as I said before, I think everything that he said is complete sophistry and gaslighting. Suella Braverman is possibly wrong. Well, not possibly wrong. I disagree with the measures that she's proposing. I think that they could backfire horribly. But I think she's right that we have a serious, serious problem that these marches are taking place on our streets. And I would say that I think at the end of that Telegraph article where she laid out these ideas, she said that we face the possibility of living in a country that is very different from the country that we know, love. I'm paraphrasing. I think actually we're already living in that country, and we need to be robust in challenging these things. But I think that the problem runs a lot deeper, and part of this is obviously to do with the fact that the police need to be able to do their job. They need to be willing to do it.
Ajmal, you've been accused of gaslighting with regards to what the term jihad means.
I'm not gaslighting at all. In fact, Emma is gaslighting the whole conversation. If we're talking about Palestinian people, we're talking about a community of people, a whole nation, occupied by Israel for 75 years, out of which they've lived in misery, and only recently 30,000 people have been killed, mercilessly. Hospitals, schools, mosques, places of worship, 11,500 children. If there is a baby killer in the world today, state-sponsored baby killer, that's Israel. Now, any attack on any nation, whether they're Jews, Muslims, Christians, I condemn them wholeheartedly. Unfortunately, Emma can't bring herself to condemn Israel. That's gaslighting. We are here together to say British people are not stupid. That's why millions of people are coming out in support of the Palestinians. And guess what? In those demo, few people get arrested. Side by side, there was a far right against the Palestinian demo. 200 people came, 92 people got arrested. Now, if figures are to be looked at, Palestinian demo has been very peaceful and in support and in solidarity of people's right to live.
Yeah. Well, that's all we've got time for, I'm afraid. Thank you both for your final minutes. We'll get you back on. We'll get you back on because this has been a great conversation.
Yes, Emma Webb and Ajmal Masroor there. But coming up, the leaked Home Office documents which expose Britain's broken immigration system. We'll be discussing that in just a couple of minutes.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there. with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Lee Anderson's Real World, Fridays from 7 p.m.
Dr. Jane Jones, who's the clinical lead for Care After Combat.
Yeah.
Jane, thanks for coming. And just tell me a little bit about your organisation. What do you do?
OK, well, thank you for having me here so we can talk about Care After Combat. So we are an organisation, a charity, who work into the prison system, working with military veterans who've somehow got involved with the justice system and...
So there's quite a high population of ex-servicemen and women in our prisons. Why is that, do you think?
So 2014, the government did a review of who was resident in UK prisons, and what they found were that military veterans are the highest occupational group, and this obviously raises some concerns. Yeah. So the government wanted to do something about that, and so they supported Care After Combat initially just as a scoping exercise, really, to see if there was any way we could help these men and women actually, you know, understand the problems that led to offending behaviour and go on to lead successful lives.
So what sort of offending behaviour are we talking typically for people that's in prison that's actually served in our armed forces?
Primarily, it's violence.
Yeah.
So that is the highest offence that we work with.
Okay.
But of course, the military, as with everybody else, it's the full range of offending behaviour.
OK, so we're in a pub, Jane, Dr. Jane, and I guess for some people, you know, the odd tip of alcohol is good, a bit of fun of a weekend, relax, let your hair down. But for some people, alcohol is not always their best friend, and I guess that plays a part in some of your veterans that end up inside.
Absolutely. So, speaking from my own experience, a good 2/3 of the people I work with have some kind of mental health problem or mental health difficulty, struggling to either adapt into civilian life or with some of the traumas they've experienced during service. People might self-medicate with alcohol to manage some of those thoughts and feelings.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Just 12% removed. That's according to leaked Home Office documents revealing 12% of illegal arrivals would be removed each year in the best case scenario under the Rwanda plan. Let's get into diving into the details of this now with the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole-Turner and the former leader of UKIP, Henry Bolton. Henry, this was an exclusive on Nigel Farage's programme last night, and it does seem that only 500 people removed in the first year of the Rwanda scheme is the best case.
Well, I sort of got a scoop on Nigel because I actually was talking about it, I think, on one of the programmes here about a month ago. I said my understanding was that the best case scenario for the Home Office is 500 going to Rwanda a year. Now, that, if you say around about 40,000 people come across the channel, that's 1 in 80. The deterrence value is utterly negligible. And so, you know, this is just another indicator, piece of evidence that the government knows full well that Rwanda is not going to deliver in terms of what the Prime Minister has said it will, stop the boats. It won't work. There is all sorts of other reasons why that minuscule deterrent effect will be even less, given the fact that we've got a situation where the immigrants who are in Calais, in the North French coast, themselves don't get all this information. It's counteracted by the people smugglers. And indeed, you know, they're there. It's very difficult for them to turn back anyway.
Amy, is this an I told you so moment for you?
I'm astounded that you're all so surprised. We've been saying this from the very start. Well, actually, I think we originally said 200, but then 200 Rwandans would have to come back. It was a reciprocal scheme right from the off, and now it's gone, oh, maximum 500. But I think that works out to about £100,000 per migrant. We could send them on a round-the-world cruise. We could train them to be pilots, and they could fly wherever they want for cheaper.
I mean, we have to say that the government has responded to this story, saying the Rwanda scheme is uncapped. The number of people who will be removed to Rwanda will depend on a range of factors, and we do not comment on unverified leaked documents. Well, I have to say, saying unverified and leaked documents in the same phrase does sort of make it sound like it's a leaked document, not one that's unverified.
Indeed, look, we know that there are obstacles legally still. We've still got to get the full thing through the parliamentary process. We've still got to figure out how the logistics of it, who is going to actually remove these people. There's a tender out at the moment. The Home Office has put a tender out for a civilian security company to be trained in how to restrain people when they put them on aircraft.
Hang on, Could you say that again?
The Home Office is outsourcing the process of actually physically putting people on aircraft and transporting them across.
Does that not ring an alarm?
Well,
bell?
it does to me. I mean, this should be policing. It's the state doing this.
Well, a lot of people will be angry, people who don't approve of the scheme on ethical grounds, but also those who wanted a scheme that would work.
Yes, but Amy, on the point, surely if people don't want to go to Rwanda, you will need a way of getting them on the plane.
But that's my... that's a complete alarm bell to me, isn't it? Doesn't that just demonstrate in one sentence the problems, the humanitarian problems of this scheme right from the start?
Well, Amy, we're going to have to leave it there for now, but please stay with us,
And the
Amy
airlines don't
Turner
wanna do
and
it.
Henry Bolton, because coming up, the mumbling speech by the US President, in which he appears to forget the name of terror group Hamas. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
I'm interested in your Royal Protocol story there about how the Queen would not be expected to visit the King more than once at the hospital or whatever. What would the benefit of that be? I'm just trying to work out why that
Well,
would
I
be
suppose it's to avoid lots of people outside making a big... Panicking and all the photographers. But otherwise, I think it's very strange. It's a sort of not showing your emotion, whereas Camilla will show her emotion because she loves him so much.
But any normal person would go and visit their loved ones in hospital.
Yes, they would, but you see, they never went with them, even when they went in. And only rarely would they go maybe once, if it's quite a long stay. But otherwise, they don't. They must talk on the phone. But I think this, you want to hug, you want to chat, you want all those things. And I think good to her. I mean, she's so good. She's following all the routine.
Yes.
And what is expected of her, more so, because she's been working very, very hard the last month. And but when it comes to actually showing her caring for her husband and the King, she wants to be there with him.
And I believe he's probably expected to be continuing with his red boxes whilst he's in there, still working, but from his sick bed.
No, I don't think he can take the red boxes into hospital. I think they will be ready for him when he comes out.
Okay, so
he
complete rest from work.
And he might have some paperwork, but I think those are so confidential that they can't be taken in. I mean, if he falls asleep and they're there, you know, you don't want to risk it. I'm sure he's got protection all the time, but I think it's not done. I don't. That's not done.
Well, he changed the location for the procedure, didn't he, so that the taxpayer didn't have to pay for two sets of security at two different hospitals.
Yes.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, a clip of the President, Joe Biden, President of the United States, of course, has gone viral on social media in the last 24 hours or so. Is the President of the United States fit for the office? Let's have a watch.
There is some movement, and I don't want to, well, maybe choose my words. There's some movement. There's been a response from there's been a response from the opposition, but yes, I'm sorry, from Hamas, but it seems to be a little over the top. We're not sure where it is. There's a continuing negotiation right now.
It was quite hard to watch.
I don't want to mock him, you know. He's an elderly gentleman, and but the question still does remain pertinent, important, vital to ask: is he fit enough to run again for office? Amy.
I know what you mean, though, because I've seen too many people taking the mick out of him, and it's almost got to the point where it's incredibly uncomfortable, because when you're watching that clip, you can always see the filing cabinet of his mind just, like, falling open, and he's going through it. But I think at the moment, he's a safer bet than the alternative.
This is a really difficult conversation to have, but doesn't this perhaps highlight how important the choice of vice president is for Joe Biden, Henry?
It does, of course. Look, you know, we all watch this. I mean, this isn't a matter for the Americans. I mean, imagine, I mean, some of us have got a bit of a difficulty with the leadership that Rishi Sunak exercises. Imagine if we had a Prime Minister who was giving press conferences of that incredibly poor and worrying quality. We as a nation would be concerned. We as a nation should be concerned anyway. And this is not a criticism of Biden, his character, or even his politics. This country, so many countries rely on the United States for economic stability, because of their global impact economically. Militarily, we've got the question of Ukraine, and we've got the Middle East. Of course, America, a massive player in all of that. It's vitally important that the world feels that there is a statesman in control in the White House. And you know, nobody can look at that video and feel that that's actually the case.
Equally, though, it's a short video.
And how long? There are many now, though.
But people are waiting for them. They're looking out for these, like, 10-second clips.
Of course they are, but
38 seconds, that one.
But of course,
not to be pedantic.
But of course,
how long was the
Of course, people are ready to jump on this. The same applies to any politician, any commentator, anybody. If you make a fluff something, or you stumble over your words or whatever, then you are going to get jumped on. And of course, that's part. You know, he's president. He is the most senior politician in the United States of America, and it is concerning. It's not to say that he has got a problem, but it doesn't look as though he's free of problems.
Amy, do you think this is why there have been poll after poll now that shows Donald Trump, a man who's under federal indictment, is polling ahead of Joe Biden?
I just can't work out the situation in America. It just absolutely baffles me that anything that has such a high polling could be voting for someone who is on the record a sexist and a racist. And I saw Emily Thornberry last week describing him as such, and then people saying, are you happy with him becoming president? Would you stand by your words? She said, yes, I would. So
Is that worrying,
Well, that's
though?
just Emily Thornberry.
Because if the Labour Party wins power in this
convicted
country, Donald Trump wins power in the United States, does that present a real and present problem for joint operations, for example, in the Middle East, for economic cooperation, for a trade deal, for things that we really do need?
I mean, absolutely, because I think the one thing's clear about Donald Trump, aside from his sexism, aside from his racism, aside from his indictment of January the 6th, is the fact that he wants America to go it alone. I think that's the biggest threat to everything, isn't it? What he said about leaving NATO, what the threats that he's made, that he wants America to be completely independent away from us.
Although
we're going to lose our best friend.
we were negotiating a trade deal with the United States that got fairly far along until he got voted out.
I think.
Yeah, Henry, last word.
We've got a situation where, yes, you know, the alternative at the moment, it looks like it's going to be Trump. Trump is more pro the UK than Biden. But what other baggage comes with that? And I think there's a debate around that as well. It's not a sort of a black and white, you know, this one's good and that one's bad. It's a mix. And I do feel that the conversation that we're having in the UK about this, and probably it's the same in the United States, is not sophisticated enough at the moment. It's not nuanced.
We'll have
the
a lot
American
more.
people have an unfortunate choice, perhaps.
We'll have a lot more in the next hour, both with Amy and with Henry, but stick with us for Royal News.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A fine, bright day for most of us, but it will be cloudy in the far south, and in the far north we'll continue to see some wintry showers, mostly for the far north of Scotland, and most of these showers will be falling as snow, some sleetiness around coasts. Otherwise, a lot of fine weather for Scotland, Northern Ireland into northern England, some decent spells of sunshine. Further south, the cloud thickens and will keep relatively low cloud in the far south with some patchy rain for the far southwest, but it's mild here. 11, 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, single figures and feeling cold in the wind across northern Scotland, where those snow showers will continue to arrive overnight, leading to some icy patches by dawn. Otherwise, a widespread frost for the northern half of the UK, but for the southern half, the cloud thickens through the night and outbreaks of rain move in. It's going to be a mild start to the day in the far southwest, if rather breezy. We've got significant temperature contrasts across the UK as we begin Thursday. Very cold in the north, very mild in the south and southwest. In between, this band of rain moving north, and as it mixes with the cold air, we're going to see some significant and disruptive snow. Mid-Wales, North Midlands, northwards, and especially for the higher parts of North Wales, the Peak District, the Pennines. Some disruption is likely with up to 15 to 25 centimetres of snow building up, and some freezing rain for higher parts of North Wales later on, staying dry for Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Patrick Christie's Tonight, weekdays from 9 p.m.
Former First Minister Nicola Sturgeon has made her much-anticipated appearance before the Scottish COVID inquiry today. It comes after allegations emerged that she deleted key pandemic WhatsApp messages, used the pandemic to push her own political agenda. But let's just cast our mind back, shall we, to August 2021, when Sturgeon was asked if she'd hand over all her WhatsApps to the inquiry. Here we go.
I think if you understand statutory public inquiries, you would know that even if I wasn't prepared to give that assurance, which for the avoidance of doubt I am, then I wouldn't have the ability. This will be a judge-led statutory public inquiry.
Which, for the avoidance of doubt, I am. OK. Well, you weren't, were you? But fast forward to today, and she was much less forthcoming.
WhatsApp messages between yourself and Mr Youssef and Ms Lloyd were produced by you. Where did you get them?
They were provided to me through the Scottish Government.
But did you delete them?
Yes.
Did you consider yourself, against that background and your considerable ministerial experience, to be precisely the right First Minister for the job?
No, that's not how I would have thought of it at all. There's a large part of me wishes that I hadn't been.
All right, then. I'm joined now by Tory MP Lee Anderson. Lee, are those just crocodile tears?
Well, it looks like crocodile tears to me, Patrick. I mean, first we had the missing camper van. Nobody knows where that is. Now we've got this nonsense. We've got these burner phones, dodgy £5 phones from wherever they bought them from, WhatsApp messages going missing. It all looks a little bit dodgy to me. I mean, she's bleating on there, she's crying on screen. This is not cutting no ice. You know, it's crocodile tears. It makes you wonder what the SNPs are all about, Patrick. It looks... I mean, the people that have burner phones, let's be clear, people that have these dodgy phones where you can't trace them and disappearing WhatsApp messages, these are normally criminals, these are drug dealers. And you know what? These SNPs are no better than criminals.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you.
every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 2 o'clock on Wednesday, the 7th of February.
Forgot the date there. Royal Duties. Downing Street has revealed that the King is to hold weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister starting later today. It follows the monarch's cancer diagnosis.
It comes as Prince William returned to royal duties, carrying out an investiture at Windsor Castle. But will there be a reunion with his brother Harry, who arrived in the UK yesterday?
Doesn't look like it. And 2:30, the queue which reveals a crisis in UK dentistry. Hundreds in Bristol waiting hours just to register. The government says it's now offering cash incentives for dentists to take on more NHS patients. Are you living in a dental desert?
And residents' fury. We're in Corby, where a 60-foot-high warehouse has been built behind houses after a council consultation cock-up, if I'm allowed to say that this time in the afternoon.
Sorry if anyone was offended by the use of that word. I must apologise for my co-host there.
I'm just blindly reading the autocue. I don't make any decisions here at all.
Yeah.
We've been looking at some of your comments that have been coming in because last hour we discussed a dramatic moment at Prime Minister's Questions. The Prime Minister was listing a number of U-turns that Sir Keir Starmer has made, one of which, he said, was being unable to define what a woman was. And then he made a crass joke about a 99%, 100% women with male appendages sort of line. That was the implication of what Rishi Sunak said. Sir Keir Starmer came back to him on it because it so happened that Brianna Ghey, the transgender teenager who was murdered, her mother was sitting in the public gallery watching it all play out. And Keir Starmer called him out on it, frankly. But you've been getting in touch with your thoughts on that exchange.
Yes, so Jones says, I think you're wrong, Tom. Keir Starmer was completely crass, using a very difficult and emotive situation to score points. He's very good at trying to humiliate the Prime Minister, and I doubt it has anything to do with any deeply held belief. Yes, Tom thinks Keir Starmer was being sincere and was genuinely shocked by Rishi Sunak's choice of words.
Well, Graham said, well done, Tom, for telling it as it is. That was a scandalous thing for the PM to say, with the mother of Brianna in the gallery. Typical comments. I found it refreshing recently covered by GB News referring Brianna rightfully as she.
Well, there you go. Carol says, I think Starmer set the Prime Minister up. Obvious by the fact one of Starmer's lackeys repeated it at the end of PMQs. Well done, Prime Minister, for making your statement.
And Dave says Starmer chose to conflate the accusation that he can't say what a woman is with the appalling atrocity committed on Brianna Ghey to make a political capital, as he usually does. So real mixed bag of views in there. Keep your thoughts coming in, gbviews@gbnews.com, and we'll get more of those after your headlines.
For me, crass from...
Thanks, Tom. From the GB Newsroom at 2, these are your headlines. A simple choice needs to be made on the future of the NHS. That's according to Sir Keir Starmer as he faced the Prime Minister in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's Questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had led the health service to fall into neglect.
He should follow Labour, scrap the non-dom tax status, use the money to fund 2 million more hospital appointments every year. But, Mr Speaker, the Prime Minister is oddly reluctant to follow us on this. What exactly is so special about this tax avoidance scheme that the Prime Minister prioritises it above the NHS?
However, the Prime Minister says the best way to ensure the NHS has the funding it needs is not to make billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Sir Keir Starmer speaking there. Now, today's PMQs come after the government revealed a plan for dentists to be offered cash incentives to take on new patients. The new scheme aims to make appointments available to around 1 million more people across England. Dentists will be offered payments of between £15 and £50 each for new patients. Hundreds of people endured long waits in Bristol earlier today, with queues seen around the block after a clinic made new appointments available on the NHS. Downing Street has confirmed Rishi Sunak will have his weekly audience with the King over the phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since a series of health blows to the royals. He carried out an investiture, a ceremony where he formally hands out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William is expected to carry out further royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. The mother of a transgender teenager who was murdered last year is due to meet the Labour leader today. Esther Jai was watching in the Commons during this afternoon's Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak was criticised for making a joke about Sir Keir Starmer's position on gender issues. Number 10 declined to apologise for the remark, insisting that it was a legitimate critique of the Labour leader's stance on the definition of a woman. And Spanish farmers are blocking major roads with tractors and burning tyres in a protest against bureaucracy and competition from outside the EU. More than a dozen major roads were blocked across Spain this morning as convoys of tractors converged on Barcelona to confront local authorities. It's the latest sign of growing anger across Europe after similar protests in Germany, France and Belgium in recent weeks. And the right-wing media personality Tucker Carlson is in Moscow and says he plans to record an interview with Vladimir Putin. The former Fox News host announced the interview late yesterday in a short video posted to his website and on social media. He said he plans to expose what he calls lies told by other media about Russia, though he provided no evidence and falsely claimed that other journalists hadn't bothered to try to interview Mr. Putin. It comes as Russia's detention of the American journalist Evan Gershkovich reaches 315 days. And heavy snow could cause disruption later this week, with as much as 20 centimetres possible in higher areas. The Met Office has expanded its yellow warning, with temperatures set to drop across Northern Ireland, North Wales and Northern England later this week. We're being warned of possible power cuts, travel delays and isolated communities being cut off. Meteorologists say the cold spell could linger into late February. And house prices are continuing to rise across Britain for a fourth straight month. Halifax says house prices saw a 1.3% increase in January. Annual growth also hit a peak of 2.5%, the highest since January last year. Average house prices now stand at just over £291,000. That's up by nearly £4,000 since December. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts. Now it's back to Tom and Emily.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 8 minutes past 2, and in the past hour or so, Downing Street have said that the King will hold private weekly phone conversations with the Prime Minister.
Yes, it comes as the monarch rests at his Sandringham estate. Number 10 and Buckingham Palace took the unusual step of confirming details about the weekly call in an attempt to show the King is carrying on with his duties.
Meanwhile, Prince William returned to royal duty today after his wife's abdominal operation. He conducted an investiture at Windsor Palace.
Well, GB News presenter Pip Thompson is in Windsor with the latest. Pip, lots of news on movements from the royals. Can you bring us the latest?
So, as you say, it has been confirmed, Emily, that weekly audience with King Charles and the Prime Minister that does normally take place face-to-face will take place over the phone today. Now, whether that is just for today or whether that is for the foreseeable doesn't yet seem to have been confirmed. But when asked if Rishi Sunak would travel to Sandringham in Norfolk, which is where King Charles is currently, for that weekly discussion, the Prime Minister's official spokesman said, "We don't in general, and we are not going to get into the habit of commenting on the Prime Minister's conversations with the King. But we have agreed with the Palace in this specific instance to confirm that they will be speaking on the phone later. So King Charles is not being seen in public at the moment while he undergoes that treatment for a form of cancer, but he is still resuming many duties behind the scenes, and also resuming duties today after some 3 weeks off is his son Prince William. Prince William has been here at Windsor Castle for an investiture ceremony this morning, handing out some 50 honours in total, and it is quite a busy day for him because later on he heads into central London for a gala dinner for the London Air Ambulance charity, and it's there that Prince William is expected to give a short speech. So we will be listening very closely. Will he mention his father, King Charles? Will he make note of the good wishes from people from all over the world? And good wishes were sent to him today from those people receiving honours. Among them was the former England striker Ellen White. She was at Windsor Castle to collect her MBE in the grand reception room, and this is what she told us afterwards.
My best wishes to the King and obviously to Kate as well, to Princess of Wales. But yeah, no, he was lovely, yeah, it was incredible to meet him again, and to obviously for him to give me the MBE. So yeah, it was a very special day.
And there were other faces receiving honours who you might not know terribly well, but my goodness, they do some amazing work for charity. Let's hear from Suzanne Hutchinson.
Amazing to have the recognition for the work that Little Hearts Matter does, and amazing to think that people are interested in what the families go through. And we didn't know who we would have, and because everybody's not been around, I was thinking, oh, I wonder who we might get. And so I really hope that King Charles is okay and that the treatment goes well, because I'm medical by background, so it's a tough time for the family. So I hope that goes well, and that the Princess of Wales is getting better as well. It's terribly important.
And as Suzanne mentioned there, she said she wasn't sure who she was going to get today, but we should just make it clear that Prince William was not stepping in for King Charles today. He does do these investiture ceremonies along with Princess Anne, and he was always scheduled to do it. But he has taken some time off because, of course, his wife, the Princess of Wales, she had that abdominal surgery. So Prince William actually hasn't performed any public duties since January the 11th. And after his duties today, he is expected to take some time off. I've been told that there is nothing in the diary for him imminently. Of course, half term is coming up, so he will be spending time with his children, won't he? George, Charlotte and Louis. Now, outside Windsor Castle, there have been well-wishers gathering as well. And a little earlier, just before I came on air, they were actually very easy to spot. I spotted Grace and Anne, and they had rocked up to Windsor Castle with a cardboard cutout of the King and a balloon, and they're here just to get updates. Anne herself had come all the way from Cardiff, and she simply wanted to know how King Charles is.
Hoping to see His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales to offer him support and cheer him on, because everybody adores Catherine, Princess of Wales, and we want to know how she is, and if we get the opportunity, if he comes by on a walkabout, to ask how she is. He's got a lot on his plate at the moment.
We want to give our support to the royal family, those who are ill, and even anybody in the whole world having the same illness or problem, that everyone they should get speedy recovery. So we are here to support them.
I did actually point out to them that, of course, King Charles is at Sandringham, some 3 hours away. He's not actually here at Windsor Castle, but he will be holding that weekly audience with the Prime Minister. And, of course, we never know what's discussed between them. But I do just wonder whether anything will be said about the Prime Minister speaking yesterday when he was asked about King Charles's cancer diagnosis. And if you remember, Tom and Emily, he said something about it being caught early. And I'm not sure whether he misspoke there or whether he later said he was misunderstood. But I just wonder if that was a little bit of a step too far yesterday for the Prime Minister in giving out quite personal information, which the Palace certainly hasn't disclosed.
Yeah, really, really interesting. There's a question mark over whether that was a mistake from the Prime Minister, if he was leaking information, if he was just speaking without authorisation, or if he made it up. And we don't know the answer to any of those questions.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not sure that we are going to, Tom. I mean, they've made it very clear, haven't they, that King Charles has a form of cancer. He's undergoing treatment. He has now gone from Clarence House yesterday to Sandringham, and that is where he's going to remain for the time being. And he'll be coming back to London for treatment. So don't expect to be seeing much of him over the next few weeks or even months.
Thank you very much indeed for all of those updates. Pip Thompson, GB News reporter there outside Windsor Castle. And great to hear what the super fans had to say.
Oh, yes, Grace and Anne were fantastic, absolutely. But in other news, former Fox News anchor Tucker Carlson will be the first Western journalist to, quote-unquote, interview President Putin since Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Yes, posting to social media site X, formerly known as Twitter, the ex-US host tells us why he's doing it.
There are risks to conducting an interview like this, obviously, so we've thought about it carefully over many months. Here's why we're doing it. First, because it's our job. We're in journalism. Our duty is to inform people. 2 years into a war that's reshaping the entire world, most Americans are not informed. They have no real idea what's happening in this region, here in Russia or 600 miles away in Ukraine. But they should know. They're paying for much of it in ways they might not fully yet perceive.
Well, let's get more on this now. Joining us down the line from Chicago to discuss this further is the chair of Republicans Overseas UK, Greg Swenson. Now, Greg, this is a pretty sizable moment. This will be one of the most viewed interviews of the year, but a huge amount of criticism on whether it will be a strenuous, rigorous interview at all, or whether, frankly, it'll be a bit sycophantic.
Yeah, I tend to disagree with the last part of your comment. You know, Tucker Carlson is a pro, and I think that's why he was getting, 3 million views a day when he was on Fox, and even more than that now. So, I think he's up to the task. I think it's great for journalism. Yes, it's a great day for Tucker Carlson and his career, but I think, he deserves it. He's asked, I imagine he'll ask the right questions. And I'm not surprised that he was able to get the interview. And I'm sure many other mainstream media outlets were trying to get the interview. And I think you saw that, some comments from even CNN yesterday. So, yes, he was a bit critical in his post about much of the mainstream corporate legacy media in the U.S. I think he has some points there. But I think anyone would have jumped at the opportunity to get this interview.
Yes, well, Greg, the reason why he may have been given the interview is because he has previously said quite a lot in support of Vladimir Putin, questioning why people say bad things about him. Why is Vladimir Putin such a bad guy, he says? He's not a danger to the states. He's not Saddam Hussein. He's not Adolf Hitler. That's technically true, but certainly he has said quite a lot that would appear at least to be quite pro-Putin, whereas the BBC have lodged many requests to interview Putin, but they have been rejected.
Yeah, I think and you'll hear that from Putin himself or his press people, that he's suspicious of the legacy media, and I don't blame him. So I can't blame anyone for being suspicious. They come in with a bias. Now, whether Tucker Carlson has a bias, yes, he's asked the right questions. He's trying to remain neutral and be a journalist and ask the questions. And I think you have to look at this in the context of the fact that, the President Biden has not really articulated the mission and the end game. And I think, it's good for journalists to be skeptical and to ask questions. So, look, I mean, we'll see what happens in the interview. But I think you have to look at this context of, and by the way, Tucker often reminds people that he's not pro-Putin. And in fact, he almost, gets a kick out of it when anybody who questions some of the directions of the government funding, in the U.S. and, for that matter, in the U.K. Anybody who questions that or asks for some sort of accounting or some sort of statement explaining it, they get labeled as a pro-Putin. I don't think that's fair either. So I think we should all just keep an open mind and see what happens in the interview.
I think it's quite hard to keep an open mind when in 2019 Tucker Carlson said we should probably take the side of Russia if we have to choose between Russia and Ukraine. And even more recently, in 2022, he said it's pretty clear Zelensky, the leader of Ukraine, has no interest in freedom and democracy. He says that Zelensky is far closer to Lenin than George Washington and called Zelensky, the democratically elected president of Ukraine, a dictator. I mean, this is just using Putin's lines to take, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know about that. I do fully admit that Tucker is very opinionated. He's an opinion journalist, and he's not afraid to voice his concerns or his opinions. So, again, I think keep an open mind. I'm not arguing for either side here, and I hope that Tucker doesn't either. I think he's just going to do that. So, and I think you also have to keep in mind the more context and perspective. These questions that Tucker asks are also what many politicians and leadership in the U.S. are asking as well. The context of this versus keeping our own border wide open. Again, I'm not advocating for either side in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. All in, I would obviously side with Ukraine and hope that Putin fails in his invasion. But in the context of the 8 million illegal migrants coming over the border and a blatant disregard for the law, the progressive open borders left, more is better and less is racist as far as they're concerned. And this is a real humanitarian tragedy occurring on the U.S. border with Mexico. Again, I know that's, in some ways that's apples and oranges, but I think that for American voters, you have to look at it in that context and what's happening in the United States right now.
Well, certainly, I can imagine this interview will get a huge amount of traction once it is published. Hundreds of millions of views, I imagine. Thank you very much for your time. Greg Swenson, Chair of Republicans Overseas. I mean, in one way, I'm thinking the interview will be very interesting and people will be able to decide whether there is bias from the interviewer themselves. People aren't stupid. And also, there are a lot of journalists who would jump at the chance to interview Vladimir Putin. But then at the same point, is it just going to further Russian propaganda?
You've just got to ask, why did he say yes to this guy? Yeah. He's imprisoned journalists in his own country. Yeah. He's rebuffed Western journalists who've asked for interview after interview after interview with him. And he says yes to someone who's got a history of making quotes, of saying things like Ukraine is worse than Russia. I mean, is this just an opportunity for another political broadcast for a man who locks up his political opposition?
And if Tucker went in too hard on Vladimir Putin, what would happen?
Well, that's suggesting that there's a possibility that he'll go in too hard on Vladimir Putin. I don't know. But I think you're right, Emily. I will watch it.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'll learn out of it, but it's interesting, isn't it?
It's very interesting indeed. Still to come, and an inconvenient tooth. Very good. The government plans to give dentists £20,000 if they move to areas of the country that don't have enough dentists, to the dental deserts, they call them. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain on GB News.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
Welcome to the show. Superb stuff, great footage. So you're right in the thick of it there. What's the mood on the ground?
Well, I've left there now. I've actually now come to that EU Council summit that I was talking about. It's still pretty chaotic. The entire city of Brussels has been completely clogged with these tractors, sort of three abreast in most of the roads across the city. The people of Brussels aren't particularly happy. I mean, this is sort of reminiscent for some people of the Just Stop Oil protests, people gluing themselves. People are unable to get to hospital appointments, and there's a lot of upset about the destruction that's happening on the streets of Brussels today. But on the other side, there's also the protests, which the farmers are saying that EU green laws simply are not able to fit with what they need to do to keep their businesses going. And just before the protests happened, we saw the European Commission actually make some concessions to the farmers' protests. And this is on the demands that were put on them to set aside somewhere in the region of 5% of their land for regrowing for biodiversity. A lot of the farmers have said that's not possible, and the European Commission has said that they can delay that coming in. So they have won a small concession with these protests.
And Jack, there's a feeling as well, a huge dissatisfaction that the European Union has managed to find 50 billion euros in aid to send to Ukraine, and yet farmers in particular are on the receiving end of net zero targets, taxation on diesel and endless red tape. So many farmers, Jack, saying they're measuring ditches to see if they have to drain them or not. There are minimum requirements on the width of battery hen enclosures, endless red tape. As Jeremy Clarkson pointed out in Clarkson's farm in Britain, they've simply had enough and they're shouting, Ursula von der Leyen, we are here.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 25 minutes past 2 and the manhunt continues for chemical attacker Abdul Azaidi. The Met Police believe the suspect is being helped by others.
Yes, Abdul Azaidi was last seen at King's Cross Underground Station at 9 o'clock on Wednesday, the 31st of January in the evening. And it's now been over a week since the dreadful attack carried out on a woman and her 2 daughters.
Well, let's get the very latest now with GB News reporter Ray Addison. Ray, you've been following this story all week, and it has now been a long time since anyone saw this man.
Yeah, the manhunt for Azaidi is well into its 7th day, and of course we've seen the latest CCTV images and footage which has been released yesterday, and it's all from Wednesday night. No sign of Azaidi since then, and also no use of his bank card, which he'd been using to navigate the London tube system. Of course, if he doesn't use that card, whether at an ATM or to use public transport, and he is holed up somewhere, maybe somebody's looking after him, or he's found somewhere to shelter himself, it's going to be very difficult to track him. Police, though, going through hundreds of hours of CCTV footage. In fact, they've brought in the counter-terrorism police, because those specialist officers, specialist at man-hunting and being able to hopefully track him down. Particularly worrying for Londoners, though. We've heard those details of his sexual offences committed in 2017. He pled guilty in 2018. He pled guilty to grabbing a woman's bottom without her consent. He also exposed himself and committed a sex act. Avoided jail, though, suspended sentence, although he was put on the sex offenders register for 10 years and given 200 hours of unpaid work. And one of the victims, one of Azadi's victims from those offences, or one of those offences, spoke to the Sun newspaper and described him as a danger to women, said that he shouldn't have been allowed to remain in the UK because, of course, we heard how after being rejected twice for asylum, after those incidents, he actually was approved for asylum. And one of his victims criticising the church for giving him a reference for that asylum plea. Now, the last known sighting is at 10:04 p.m. on Wednesday night, so 7 days ago now. He was walking past the Unilever building and heading towards Victoria Embankment. He'd been at Tower Hill Station. That's about a half-an-hour walk, and so the injury that he's got to his right eye doesn't seem to be slowing him down. Now, if he continued along Embankment, he'd actually make his way right here to New Scotland Yard. That's again another half-an-hour walk. So is it possible that right now Met Police officers are scouring CCTV footage from New Scotland Yard?
It's a thought, isn't it? My goodness, but it does seem that this is a hunt that given it's going on for more than a week now, could well go on for weeks and weeks more with no answer. Ray Addison, thank you for giving us the very, very latest there from New Scotland Yard.
Well, that was a depressing assessment, Tom.
Well,
I hope it's today
haven't found him by now.
I hope it's today. It could be today. Going to be positive. Anyway, dentists will be offered a golden hello payment of up to £20,000 to address the shortage of dentist appointments in the UK.
Well, given that it's coming up to 2:30 in the afternoon, we might as well do a 2:30 segment. Earlier in Prime Minister's Questions, the dentistry recovery plan led to a heated exchange between Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak.
I welcome the fact that he's finally admitted that he's failed on waiting lists in the NHS. I also welcome that he's finally acknowledged the crisis in NHS dentistry. He's calling it a recovery plan after 14 years of Tory government. What exactly does he think the NHS dentistry is recovering from?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as ever, he conveniently forgets the impact of a pandemic on NHS dentistry, and it was specifically because of the close proximity nature of dental provision that it was unable to operate as normal throughout the pandemic. That was the recommendation of the medical and clinical experts, Mr. Speaker, which is why inevitably there is a backlog in dental care and the impact that has. But that's why, as my honourable friend, the Health Secretary, will outline later today for the House, we're putting more funding in to provide more NHS provision across the country, on top of plans that will see the number of dental training places increase by 40%, Mr. Speaker. But I would actually just point out, our plans mean that there will be 2.5 million more NHS appointments, which is in fact 3 times more than the Labour Party are proposing.
Now, we didn't plan this, but the time is precisely 2:30 in the afternoon, and I just can't think of a better time to be talking about dentistry
You already made that joke,
problems.
Tom.
But now it's actually 2:30. Anyway, our reporter Theo Chikomba joins us from the most famous dental practice in the United Kingdom. Theo, why is this dental practice in Bristol quite so famous now?
Yes, well, for the last couple of days, they've had hundreds of people queuing outside this door. For those who are watching on television, just over my right shoulder, going all the way down the street, there were hundreds of people queuing up, and it's turning into a desperate situation. I spent some time within the surgery in the last hour or so, and they're having to turn people away. They even had to lock the door. But the issue is they've got some of those 1,500 patients who they've got to register. They've started turning up for their appointments here today. But of course, people are coming in their groups every now and again to come to the door to ask, can we please register? And they've been told you have to come back in around 8 weeks. And one person I heard just a few moments ago was pleading, can you please register me because I'm in so much pain? And people are saying, well, are you registering people who live further away from this area? So again, it's a desperate situation, but here's what the operations manager had to say.
I'm afraid we're going to have to bring that to the audience in a little bit, but Theo Chikomba, thank you so much for bringing us the very latest there, just after 2:30 in the afternoon.
All right, Tom, you don't need to drill it in. Do you want a crown for the worst dad's joke of the day?
Seems like you're going for it now. I haven't prepared anymore.
Yeah,
well, very
no
good
one's going to pay me for stand-up anytime soon anyway. But this is a serious, very serious,
it's a serious thing.
Very serious
we shouldn't make any jokes. It's a bit too painful, all of that. Let's stay with us.
Don't want to get toothache.
We'll be reporting live from Corby in just a moment, where a 60-foot-high warehouse has been built behind houses after a council consultation blunder. What's all that about? That's after your news headlines.
It's 2:32. I'm Sophia Wensler in the GB newsroom. A simple choice needs to be made on the future of the NHS. That's according to Sir Keir Starmer as he faced the Prime Minister in the Commons today. It comes as the government announced a new plan to boost the number of dental appointments available across England. Speaking at Prime Minister's Questions, the Labour leader said 14 years of Conservative government had led the health service to fall into neglect. However, the Prime Minister says the best way to ensure the NHS has funding it needs is not to make billions of unfunded spending commitments.
Record funding, record doctors and nurses, record number of appointments, higher cancer survival rates. But what's happening under Labour's watch in Wales, Mr. Speaker? Let's have a look. A fifth of people in Wales are currently on a waiting list. Waits of 18 months or more are 10 times higher than that in England, and people are waiting twice as long for an operation. Their failure has sent the Welsh NHS back to square one, and will never let them do that here.
Downing Street says Rishi Sunak will have his weekly audience with the King over the phone following His Majesty's cancer diagnosis. Meanwhile, the Prince of Wales has made his first public appearance since a series of health blows to the royals. He carried out an investiture, a ceremony where he formally hands out state honours at Windsor Castle. Prince William is expected to take on further royal duties during his father's treatment, along with the Queen and Princess Anne. And house prices are continuing to rise across Britain for a fourth straight month. Halifax says the property market saw a 1.3% increase in January. Annual growth also hit a peak of 2.5%, the highest since January last year. Average prices now stand at just over £291,000. That's up by nearly £4,000 since December. For the latest stories, sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the QR code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
Farage, Monday to Thursday from 7 p.m.
Lots of people have different ideas, but principally a conservative approach to getting growth is to reduce taxes so that people, ordinary people and businesses can spend more of their own money to invest and grow the economy.
So the theory is that you cut taxes and that then pumps more money into the economy.
Exactly right. And then people, it's not government that are creating wealth. It's individuals, businessmen, companies that create wealth. It's the private sector that creates wealth, that the public sector then taxes and spends.
I get the theory, but one of the criticisms of you,
sure,
and I think one of the criticisms actually of all political parties, is they appear to be incapable of cutting government spending.
That's the key. I mean, and I think when I look back, is that we should have had a credible plan to reduce the increase in spending. Now, that's often a difficult concept to explain.
But it's in line with inflation, etc.
That's all right. So when you're slowing the increase, it means, one year you spend £100 and the next year you spend maybe £101 as opposed to going up to £110. So the actual level isn't going down, but you're slowing the increase. And that's very much what I tried to do. And actually, looking back, the one thing I wish I'd done, was to present a credible spending plan at the same time as the tax cuts that we announced.
You had a go, it didn't work out for whatever reason, and that analysis will go on for some years to come. We have Jeremy Hunt there as Chancellor now, hinting quite strongly now there won't be any tax cuts, but the truth of it is, under 14 years of Conservatives, for a variety of reasons, the tax burden has risen.
That's right.
To the highest since the Attlee government, way back in
80 years,
1951, whatever
right.
it is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
Welcome back. Now, furious residents in Northamptonshire are blasting their local council after a 60-foot-high, quote-unquote, monster warehouse was built right behind their homes.
This is Tom Harwood's dream. You want to see build, build, build. More warehouses aplenty. But homeowners on the Hook Close in Corby claim a metal frame appeared overnight, and they say they weren't consulted.
Well, joining us from the shadow of the warehouse is our East Midlands reporter, Will Hollis. Will, there's a little bit more to this story, isn't there? Because it turns out perhaps just the other side of the houses is a massive great industrial estate. Was it that much of a surprise?
Yes, well, it's 60 foot high. When it's complete, it will have space for around 100 cars and 25 HGV vehicles, but not a single person living on this street on Hook Close was warned that it would be coming, and that's ultimately because of a failing at the local council, Northamptonshire Council, which is the unitary council for the Corby, Wellingborough and Kettering area, because the council actually sent the consultation forms for planning to an area about half a mile away, not Hook Close, but for Hubble Road. So local people about a half a mile away, maybe a 5-10 minutes drive, were warned that this warehouse would be coming, but local people were not, and that's what made Georgie Wallace, whose garden I'm standing in right now, so upset, along with many other local people who live on this road. Georgie said that she's been living in hell ever since.
I mean, it's just been living hell. It feels like it's gone up overnight. But as a resident of Hook Close, this has sort of impacted, my well-being. It's in my garden, sort of thing. I'm not going to be able to sell. I mean, I will be able to sell, but I'm, the devalue on my property because of this. Right now, I'm restless, like we all are. I think the whole street, we're all stressing. You work Monday to Friday, you want to enjoy your weekends, and then, if we get summer, I can't enjoy myself in the summer because I'm overlooked by this monstrosity.
Well, the developers, Block Industrial, say they've already completed groundworks and it's actually already advertising on Rightmove too. The local council, the Conservative leader, his name is Mr. Smithers, he says that it is an error. They did send it to the wrong place, but it is lawful and they're going to try their hardest to make sure that this doesn't happen again in the future. This is, of course, very prime real estate. It's only a few miles away from the M1, but not prime real estate if a massive warehouse is overshadowing your garden, especially in summer when you might be hoping to have a barbecue.
Yes, not at all. Thank you very much indeed, Will Hollis there reporting to us live. Tom, come on, you would be absolutely furious if you owned a home there and then a monstrosity like that was built right behind you.
I did think that was an outrage until I looked on a map, saw that it was basically in the middle of an industrial estate, and what's more, where it's being built, there was a warehouse there just a couple of years ago that got torn down. It's just replacing a former warehouse.
Do you think these people, these residents, are complaining for nothing?
No, I think obviously the council messed up by not sending them the consultation, but I mean there will have been a planning permission process as well. I think to some extent they should have looked at the planning permission process.
Well, there you go, la-di-da. Joining us now is broadcaster and author Amy Nicole-Turner and the former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Shall we start with PMQs today? And Sunak being heavily criticised over what's been seen as a transgender dig at Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer as Brianna Ghey's mother watched on. Shall we take a listen?
Defining a woman. Although in fairness, that was only 99% of a U-turn. The list goes on, but the theme is the same, Mr. Speaker. It's empty words, broken promises, and absolutely no plan. Keir Starmer.
Of all the weeks to say that, when Brianna's mother is in this chamber, shame, parading as a man of integrity when he's got absolutely no responsibility.
Absolutely shameful, those are the words of Keir Starmer, and it's caused quite a lot of debate online. But let's turn to our panel now. Henry, this is a line Rishi Sunak often trots out, but at the start of Prime Minister's questions, Sir Keir Starmer said that Brianna Ghey's mother was sitting up there in the public gallery. Did Rishi Sunak mess up?
It was inept. The thing is, we're getting too many inept things from Rishi Sunak. I think he should apologise, possibly even in private to her. I think we've got a problem with Prime Minister's questions. And it becomes it's a cockpit of throwing brickbats at the other side and getting your backbenchers to go blah, blah, blah. it is meaningless in any other way than entertainment, really. And it's good for the media because they can get a headline out of it and we can discuss it. But I think it was inept. It was unnecessary. But at the same time, it was couched in I'm not sure that the whole clip was there. He listed a whole range of U-turns that Keir Starmer has committed, including the definition of a woman. And this was one of those things. So, you know, it's in the context of PMQs that should be fundamentally reformed.
But the fact is, Keir Starmer has consistently been on the right side of the debate, the correct side, and Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives have consistently been on the ugly side, the toxic side, the wrong side.
Keir Starmer did say that he wanted to introduce self-ID, and he's rode back on that over the course of his leadership.
He rode back
That's
on
a fair
that
point to make.
Under great pressure, but he hasn't used the plight of trans people as a wedge issue to gain votes.
A lot of people have been writing in, though, Amy, that perhaps this issue has been weaponised on both sides. Rishi Sunak making what appeared to be a bit of a crass comment there, considering who was in the public gallery, but also Keir Starmer for then, you know, bringing up the fact that Brianna Jai's mother was there. Is that okay?
He said this so many times, and it has made people consistently uncomfortable so many times. It's just this time people are like, well, it's OK to ridicule trans people just as long as there's not someone in the room who's affected. Every time somebody mentions this issue, they should picture Brianna Jai, because that is who the debate is constantly about. It is the most toxic and weaponised topic in recent history. Whenever I mention trans people, I get an onslaught of bile, let alone what it's like to be a trans person at the moment.
I mean, I think you were right, Emily. It was a crass comment. That's better than inept. It was crass. But at the same time, there is a reaction to the public and politics and the media being sort of subjected to this identity politics. We have equality in this country and we need to ensure that everybody is treated equally, but we don't need to have to kowtow to activist groups and activist campaigns, which, frankly, highlight the differences between us rather than what we all have in common. This country is being riven in all sorts of different ways. There are schisms, factions, whatever, and they are identity-based, their race, their religion, their gender. Look, we all live in these islands together, and it is only together that we're going to be able to make our economy and our society function. We've got people who are deliberately driving a wedge through all of that, and I think that what would be called the centre-right or the right are pushing back and saying, live your life how you want, but do not pressure me to live my life and fit around
Henry,
you.
You're frankly incorrect. Lee Anderson said that the general election will be fought on trans issues and culture wars. It's the Conservatives.
I don't speak for Lee Anderson. With you both
I think that was a silly thing to say.
After this short break. Don't go anywhere.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Britain's newsroom, weekday mornings from 9:30.
When you listen to Nigel Farage's assessment there, do you feel that maybe this is as good as it was going to get, given that we had the pandemic and it was inevitably always going to be a bit of a mixed bag?
Well, I think it's a bit of a poor excuse from Nigel there that they haven't done it properly. The facts are, Nigel, that it's not worked. It's not going to work. Yes, we will rejoin. I mean, are we better off for it?
Can I jump in there, Charlie? We're going to rejoin under which government? Because Labour aren't going to do that, unless you don't think...
But I mean, it's going to be unavoidable not to join, because I think it's getting worse and worse for us. I mean, let me just say this. Are the NHS better because we're out of Europe? No, they're not, because they're not employing more staff. Is the building trade better off? No. Is travelling abroad or to the EU or staying in the EU, are we better off? No. Are we better off because foods rise because of the EU? No. Are we better off with imports and export? No, because they're taking longer. The overall result is that we're not better off. The killer point here is 57% of the public would now vote to remain. 33% would leave. Surely that's the telling point.
It depends on the pollster, Charlie, because we were talking to a very good pollster earlier who said there's no enthusiasm for any change in a year. Maybe 10 years, they might be thinking about it.
Belinda de Lucia, let's bring you in. I'm sure you want to react to what Charlie said.
I mean, who would have thought that the UK wanting to run its own affairs and making our politicians more accountable would be so revolutionary? EU Parliament voted a majority to get rid of the vetoes, the last remaining scraps of democracy that the EU had. Now, luckily for EU citizens at the moment, you know, it means a treaty change to actually go forward. But that is the mood. The ever closer union. We have dodged a federalised, globalist, international, power-gobbling, anti-democratic organisation, and that's worth more than a few trade and travel perks for a few wealthy people in this country.
Hear, hear. Belinda de Lucia, Charlie Mullins, great to see you both.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's 10 to 3 and we've just appeared on your screen, so let's continue our chat with the broadcaster and author Amy Nicole-Turner and the former UKIP leader Henry Bolton. Now, ex-Fox News top host, Tucker Carlson, he had 3 million people watching him every evening, I believe. Huge amount of support for him. But he's doing an interview with Vladimir Putin in Russia. I believe it's already taken place, so it may imminently be available on Twitter. Amy, what do you think? Do you think that is acceptable?
I think it's incredibly dangerous because he has a previous of indulging Russian propaganda and sympathising with Putin, and also that combined with the fact that, you said it yourself, he's one of the most well-known presenters in America, which means he comes with a certain amount of trust, and I think people are going to approach this interview with thinking, this is one of the most famous men in America. Of course I can believe everything that comes out of it, which, when you look, this is legitimising a leader accused of war crimes. And I've seen it doled out on Twitter as exclusive. Wow, what an opportunity. Really? Is that where we are at, where we want to perpetuate someone who has already been who is guilty of such heinous crimes, as if it's some sort of scoop celebrity interview?
Henry, what do you make of this? Because I suppose if it were a vigorous interview, this would be amazing. This would be a great opportunity to challenge someone accused of war crimes. I suppose the criticism is it might not be that rigorous.
Well, I haven't seen the interview. I don't know whether it's taken place or not yet. You know, in a sense, we've got to wait and see what the outcome is. So, but I'm concerned because, as Amy says, there's a history with Tucker Carlson of being pro-Russian, being anti-Ukrainian, being anti-American involvement in Ukraine, and there is a storyline. Now, I've got a lot of background in Ukraine and with the Russians. I've held negotiations with Russian ministers. I know some of them very well from my international diplomacy work. I've negotiated security agreements, and I worked with the National Security and Defence Council in Ukraine. I know the subject well. But there is, I know, we haven't got time to cover it now, that there is a huge amount of misinformation and disinformation out there and regarding the war. And a lot of it is based on what Putin said in December 2022, before he launched the invasion the following February, in which he basically said NATO expansionism and all the rest of it. It is utter bunkum. It is rubbish. And I hope that Tucker Carlson hits Putin with that, but I don't think he will. If he does, then
There's this narrative that NATO used to stop at Germany and now it goes right up to the border of Russia.
But Russia itself drafted something called the Helsinki Final Act. They are asked for, it's an agreement, 57 countries. They asked for the agreement. They drafted the agreement. They chaired the meetings in which it was all discussed, which guaranteed Ukraine territorial integrity and sovereignty within existing borders and its right to choose its own alliances, security alliances, with whomever it wanted to. Now, there was not one NATO soldier stationed in Eastern Europe until 2017. Not one. And that was after Russia had gone into the Donbass and Crimea. Another thing, the Budapest Memorandum. 1994, if I remember correctly, and implemented in 96. Russia guaranteed territorial integrity in existing borders to Ukraine if Ukraine handed over its nuclear arsenal to Moscow, which it did. And all of these agreements and others have been violated by the Russians.
Amy, I must bring in Amy because we're running out of time. Amy, you're sceptical of this. You don't think it should necessarily be taking place, but will it not be illuminating? Even if it's biased, it'll still be interesting and of note.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's going to be interesting, but I think the long game here is to curry favour with Trump, and I think it's going to legitimise that position that America shouldn't be funding Ukraine, and it's going to put that in a lot more people's minds than potentially...
Well, that is all we have time for. We've got to get to Martin Daubney. Martin, what's up on your show?
He's coming.
So, OK, what we've got today is the Home Office in crisis? Is it time to deport foreign criminals? There's a debate today in the Commons. We're picking up on that. Is it time to stop benefits to triple killer Valdo Calacane? Should Rishi apologise for his trans comment? I don't think he should. And what's the real reason you can't get a dentist place? Is it the NHS or is it immigration? That's all coming up on my show, 3 till 6 p.m. But first, it's time for your latest weather forecast.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello again, it's Aidan McGivern here from the Met Office with the GB News forecast. A fine, bright day for most of us, but it will be cloudy in the far south, and in the far north we'll continue to see some wintry showers, mostly for the far north of Scotland, and most of these showers will be falling as snow, some sleetiness around coasts. Otherwise, a lot of fine weather for Scotland, Northern Ireland into northern England, some decent spells of sunshine. Further south, the cloud thickens and will keep relatively low cloud in the far south with some patchy rain for the far southwest, but it's mild here. 11, 12 Celsius. Elsewhere, single figures and feeling cold in the wind across northern Scotland, where those snow showers will continue to arrive overnight, leading to some icy patches by dawn. Otherwise, a widespread frost for the northern half of the UK, but for the southern half, the cloud thickens through the night and outbreaks of rain move in. That's going to be a mild start to the day in the far southwest, if rather breezy. We've got significant temperature contrasts across the UK as we begin Thursday. Very cold in the north, very mild in the south and southwest. In between, this band of rain moving north, and as it mixes with the cold air, we're going to see some significant and disruptive snow. Mid-Wales, North Midlands, northwards, and especially for the higher parts of North Wales, the Peak District, the Pennines. Some disruption is likely with up to 15 to 25 centimetres of snow building up, and some freezing rain for higher parts of North Wales later on, staying dry for Scotland.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
The Camilla Tominey Show, Sunday mornings from 9:30.
Questions to be answered, and there seem to be a significant amount, does once again point its way to a public inquiry into exactly what happened in this case. Starmer's called for that. Would you call for that too?
I certainly think that first of all, there's one thing that's happening now. The NHS have to order an independent inquiry. That's been done. So they've got to look at all the whys and wherefores of what happened with this man. If it appears that we're not getting sufficient depth and breadth to this, then I think having an inquiry with all the powers that brings would be extremely advantageous. What I don't want is some long-winded inquiry that will take years, by which time other people will have been put at risk and maybe other lives have lost. We know what the problems are here, Camilla. Law's been passed on this. This is all about making sure on the ground we implement the highest degree of monitoring in order to ensure the safety of the public.
Has care in the community failed? I mean, it seems oxymoronic to say that it's care in the community in this case. We know that the number of psychiatric care beds has been slashed from 52,000 back in 2001 to 24,000 now. I've anecdotally, because I wrote my column about this in The Telegraph yesterday, received quite a lot of correspondence from people saying the situation with care in the community is dire. People aren't being adequately monitored. Was it a mistake to close down all of those mental institutions?
I don't think we should go back to those days when we had those appalling institutions where we just lock people away and forget about them, and not just mental health people, but autistic people and disabled people. Horrific way to treat individuals. And you know, I